Today I'm going to talk to you about keeping cubs or lions in captivity and what it means to me, what it means to my family, and what we've learned about this over the years. I'm just going to set the setting again because the last time I said this is on an episode that we may possibly not broadcast due to the fact that there is stuff that I spoke about that we've still got to check whether I'm allowed to talk about, because I spoke about things in the lion industry and we just have to check whether it's permissible that I spoke about these things. So I am in the cottage. I'm on the lion sanctuary, but whereas we live in a tent up on the side of the mountain so that we are with the lions, not with lions as in lions don't live with us, because then they would actually eat us. But our tent is surrounded by lion enclosures. So we live up there with the lions. The reason we live on the side of the mountain is because then we could be with the lions, which is what we need to do. So Lena and I live in a tented camp on the side of the mountain. I've been there for 8 and a bit years. And what we've discovered when trying to do this podcast is that it's not really good to be in a tent. The tent's always moving, there's always flapping, there's sounds, the canvas is flapping, the wind. I mean, you have dogs barking, which, to be honest, we possibly will have here as well. And the lions roar a lot, but we've also noticed that the even on our phones, that the lion's roar doesn't carry on a phone at all. Like I'll be chatting to somebody and say, "Oh, stop, listen." And I mean, the lions where I am in real life, the lions are roaring so much so that I almost have to stop the call because I can't hear the person I'm speaking to. The lions are roaring so loudly. Yet the person on the other side of the end of the call can't hear the lions. So we've realized that must be the timbre, the frequency of the lion's roar doesn't pick up very well with the microphone. So, but anyway, we still have realized that it's better to do this podcast down here. And then the building, so we've got this little cottage we rent. The building stays still, which is great. And there's electricity, which we don't have at our tent, and there's Wi-Fi, which we don't have at the tent. So that's where I am, is in the cottage, and Lena is out in the veld on the sanctuary while I do this specific episode. So I'm going to talk about lions in captivity. So when I first heard about lions in captivity, I am South African, born and bred, but I'd never heard about lions in captivity until the year in which I turned 40. So it's not something that in every part of South Africa is normal and known about. The life I lived, I did not know that lions were kept in cages, that they were bred, that they were on breeding farms, and they were being used for their body parts and in all ways used. Lions being exploited for tourism, for people to come and see, and also then ultimately their demise is exploited as well. But my point is that it's not something that everybody knows about, even South Africans. And so when I first came to know about it at all, it was actually on a very personal level, in that it was just about my friend's father who happened to have lions. And the way she put it is, he just likes lions. So she didn't say he was farming with the lions, he just likes lions. And so it started off with him just having a few lions kept around his house because he liked them. And then I started seeing photos and videos of those said lions that are around his house, and they were also inside the house. So there were lions on the dining room table and on the furniture and in the bed and in his car and in his garden. I had no idea of the extent of the numbers involved of lions. I thought he just had a handful of lions, and they loved him so much that they could be in and around him and in his house. So at first, when I saw these photos and I would see the lions in human settings, I actually thought, wow, that's like kind of amazing. I was sort of attracted to it, to be honest. I didn't know the situation around it. So that's what I'm sort of getting at here, is that it looks quite desirable it looks. It's quirky, and I don't mean that in the same way as I now see lion quirks, like myself and Lena and all of you. At the time, I thought, wow, this is unique. It's not happening all over. Okay, I'm just going to interrupt myself and say the lions are busy roaring now. And I don't know if you'll hear them, but they're roaring. So yeah, it felt to me like it wasn't a normal situation, and it wasn't something that was happening all over. So I was like, wow, only this guy who happens to have a few lions around because he really likes lions is living this life. And it was engaging, and I was interested, I was intrigued. So when I started working with his daughter, who was at the time a good friend of mine, to try and help her sort out all of his things, his issues. He had many, many issues, many court cases, many legal battles that he was fighting, all for another day's story. But I started helping her with all of his issues and all these situations. And one of the things I did was I said, let's get his story out there, because if I was so intrigued and sort of taken in by his interactions with the lions, his interactions, not as that you saw a lot of him with the lions. You know, the few photos that had him with the lions, he often had an electric taser in his hand or strapped to his belt for safety, one would presume. Well, I presumed. But just the interaction in that they were all over his house and in his car, and you'd see photos of the staff member, walking across the lawn with a wheelbarrow full of meat, and all these lions running after the meat, young lions, none of them fully grown. And so I thought, well, if I'm so intrigued and captivated by this, then so would other people in the world. So I actually set up a blog post for him and then a website for him, because I was trying to save his farm and trying to save him from going under, because there were, as I said, legal battles. But the legal battles, some of them were in the region of people had claims against him and the judgments against him for over like 7 million rand. So the whole place was going to go under, and I was just, what could I do to help? So I set about sharing the fact that he had lions and mainly cubs in his house, in his home. And then I went there. I hadn't been there. His farm being in the Free State, which is it almost felt like a distant planet from where I lived in the Western Cape. So I went there, and again, okay, now my mind's going off in two directions. There are two things I want to say here. The one, though, is in line with today's episode and what I'm saying about being intrigued by lions being around people, and the other is completely contradictory. So I'm going to leave the contradictory one for now, and I'm just going to talk about this topic. We were staying in a little cottage on the farm, and surrounding the cottage were lion enclosures. So there were lions, just you could see them from the kitchen window. You could sit out on the veranda, and there were lions. You could hear them roaring. 80 degrees around the cottage, they were roaring, because there were lion enclosures all around the farm. There were at that stage 83 lions in these enclosures around the farm. So there was a lot of roaring. Oh man, as in my friend Kathy, who had done the trip with me, and my two younger children, we were intrigued, we were captivated. We were sitting there going like, wow, we can see, like we couldn't believe that we were actually seeing real live lions outside of the window and on the other side of the lawn. The garden of the cottage we were in had a little orchard, and we would go and sit under the fruit trees of the orchards, and we'd be 3-4 meters away from lions who would stalk my children from the other side of the fence. But still, we thought, wow, we can't believe what we're actually seeing. This is so amazing. So then back to the contradictory thought that I had a few moments ago. I had, on driving into that property on the night one, we arrived there just as it was getting dark. It was a summer evening. It was October, which is summer in South Africa. And we'd arrived there, as I said, it was sunset-ish, dusk. And we had to drive through a lion enclosure that had 4 males in it, these big, beautiful, fully grown males with their amazing manes. We drove through this enclosure, and the 4 males came and plastered their heads up against the windows of the car. We were not in a large car, so we were like my head was sort of sitting in the driver's seat, was pretty much equal, if not a little bit lower than the lion's head. But these 4 lions had their heads pressed up against, their faces pressed up against the windows of the car. My children in the back, Ron and Sinead, skimmied over and were sitting like in the middle of the seat, as far from the windows as possible. Kathy in the passenger front seat was, she was, I hadn't realized that everyone else was afraid because I was so intrigued and amazed. And I can tell you that in nearly 5 years that I was on that farm, it never happened again. It was the only time. It was on our first arrival and entry there that we had this procession, this greeting, the welcome committee. Other than those 4, I hadn't actually really seen any lions on that evening because it got dark and we were at the house, and where we were greeted at the house, Pat actually made us sit out on the lawn in the little row of chairs in front of the rabbit hutch, an empty rabbit hutch, and he got one of the ladies there to serve us milk. So we were sitting there with glasses of milk, which none of us drank, looking at a rabbit hutch. And then it was supper inside and then off to bed. But I woke up in the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning hearing lions roaring. And it rumbled right through the very soul of me. The lion roars went inside of me, and it was almost like a switch was switched. I don't know what happened, but it was like I was activated. I sat up and I was just like, wow. And I waited for the light of for dawn to come so I could look outside and see what I was hearing. And that happened eventually after some hours, that eventually it started lightening, and I was waiting at the window, the upstairs window, looking out across where I knew the lion enclosures to be. And as it lightened and the sun started actually gleaming off wires, fences, electric fences, and I saw lions pacing up and down in small enclosures, square, rectangular enclosures, fence after fence, enclosure after enclosure, without very much. Some of them had a few gum trees in them, but most of them didn't have any trees, any natural features, just blocks of land with lions walking up and down. And poof, there went the magic of the middle of the night's roaring. I was just like, what am I doing here? Followed very closely by this feeling of, what are they doing here? And everything inside of me was just, this is wrong. So there is the contradictory thought. But I must go back to the fact that over the next few days, I did still have this completely, this feeling of that I had already mentioned, of being sort of captivated and intrigued by the fact that I could see lions from the window and from the veranda, and everywhere we went, we're walking down the road, walking along with my kids, and there are lions stalking us on either side of the fences. And then also what I did was I actually, following that thought of I wanted to get out of there, didn't want to be there, and then this following thought of I want to get them out of there, the lions out of there, on the next day, so morning 2, I woke up early and I went and I met up with Tulani, who was the main man who works with the lions there. And he does a perimeter check every single morning. So I went and I met him at the gate at 5 a.m., much to his surprise, and I went walking around with him and I took notes of every single lion's name. I made little notes of like physical descriptions, little idiosyncrasies, things I could see. It helped if it was like males and females mixed together. So first of all, what I do was group them as they are grouped in their enclosures. So instead of it just being 83 lions, it now became 26 groups. And then in those groups, I would give the group a name, and usually depending on, some feature of like which camp they were in, the one with the oak trees or the one to the next to the cottage or whatever. And then I would give in each group, if there were males and females, it helped. And if there were white and brown lines, it helped because then you had distinguishing features. But I would learn I wrote down these on my list from listening to Tulani. The mothers, the fathers, sisters, brothers, siblings, and this one had a mark, that one had a scratch, this one's mane was like that. and also a little bit about their characters, which ones he deemed to be nice, good, not so nice, timid, whatever descriptive features he could give me. And I made this list. And then he didn't know this, but I went home and I studied it that night. So the next morning when I went walking with him at 5 a.m., and I actually knew names, like I said, oh, Talani, looks like Shady Lady's limping, or look, it's the second day that Drumbeat Girl's not lying with the rest. And he almost fell over backwards. Hi, Abel, you know these lines. Because he couldn't believe that I knew their names and things about them that I had studied. But what that did was took them from just being generic lions behind a fence to being individuals. And that changed a lot about how I felt. And that's why I was willing to stay for the following 2 weeks, which was the committed time period that I had said to my friend I would go and stay there for to help her father. And in that time, I saw the lions differently. But I think that might be why it also allowed me the freedom to be intrigued that the lions were there. So, my fascination was allowed to exist over and above the distaste and the sort of desperation of what are they doing here. I still at that point didn't know, because there's nothing there to outwardly show you, especially when the people that own the place or running it keep telling you they don't breed, they don't sell. All the lions that I did discover had been sold, because there certainly was evidence that I came across because I was in the vault with the paperwork. I could see invoices, I could see names. There were signs that were lying in the shed, signs like notice boards that were lying in the shed that had been on line enclosures with names, but names of lions that weren't there. And I was asking Tulani, like, who's this? Who's Whiskey? Who's, I don't know, Kahlua, Champagne? They were different names. And I was like, who are these lions? Caramel, Pudge? Because they didn't exist. And he was just like, oh, he doesn't know. But I mean, there were signs, like there were things that made me realize lions had been sold. And then when I questioned my friend, she was like, no, it was a lady who used to work there. The lady who used to work there did it behind their back, did it illegally. So I believed them. So as much as my heart didn't like seeing lions behind fences, and I wanted to do something about this, I didn't believe they were there for any kind of ill purpose, or there was no ill intent behind them being there. It was just that my friend's father liked lions. So my point here is that if one sees lions behind fences, if you go to a place like that and say you go and you stay in that cottage where I used to live, and you can see lions out of the window, you can sit and have a glass of wine on the veranda and you can see lions, and you don't know that they are there to be bred and they've been sold, and that in fact there was a shed there where they did the skinning and the boiling down of bones. If you don't know that, a person could really see everything to do with the lion in the house, a lion walking alongside of a person, as being desirable, being wonderful, being something that they might want to emulate, or certainly will want to go and visit and maybe give money towards. So that is how we started off, my children and I. We were there and we were intrigued. Then cubs started being born while we were there. And not all of them needed to be cared for. I broke the pattern there. I know this because the staff couldn't understand why I was doing it. But I broke the pattern of leaving cubs with the mothers if the mother was caring for them. So of the 48 cubs that were born in the first 3 months that I was there, not 48, sorry, 32 cubs that were born there in the first 3 months that I was there, only 18 we needed to look after. The others the mothers looked after. But there were those that were not looked after by the mothers, and those each had their own stories, and I will dedicate episodes to each one or each of those groups. But those ones, their mothers definitely didn't look after them. So it is the potential exists that if mothers themselves were taken away, removed from their mothers as cubs, they didn't grow up with a lion mother looking after them, that then those lionesses often are not good, don't make good mothers themselves. So I don't want to say that every place that takes cubs away from their mothers are doing it for the correct reason. Everyone says they're doing it because the mothers didn't look after the cubs, and I have learned that places that breed and just want to put the mothers back into estrus as quickly as possible so that they can fall pregnant again, they remove cubs, and they will often give tourists the excuse that the mother didn't look after them. But I saw for myself in that farm in those first few months that there were 18 cubs that weren't looked after, and so my children and I looked after them. And as I say, those will all be in their own episodes. But the thing is that we started seeing, well, I certainly started seeing quite quickly that this was wrong. We had to stop the breeding. And so my mindset quite quickly was altered from, oh, wow, how cute. I can't believe I just said cute. I really don't like it when people use the word cute with lions. Post a picture on Facebook of the most amazing, awesome, huge lion standing doing something, and people send all these little emojis saying, cute, 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 cute. Can come and stand in front of that lion and say cute. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent here, and I'm not meant to be off on tangents on this podcast. So, yeah, I learned quite quickly that although it was just fascinating to hold a cub, and it's kind of awesome and endearing when this cub loves you and the cub snuggles you and these cubs start coming running to you, like they know you and they've accepted you and you're part of their family. And those cubs growing up are turning into lions. It's not just some arbitrary little animal that loves you and you can snuggle with and they trust you, but a lion. And so there is this absolute wonder and awe that comes along with that. So I understand people who come to South Africa or even to places, it turns out that all over the world, people are breeding cubs for this purpose. It attracts tourists. It attracts animal lovers. You go into this and you're like, it is awesome to have had a moment with a lion, be it a cub at the time, but it's still a lion. I understand that it is awesome and it's appealing. It didn't take long at all for us to realize that it is wrong. We're doing what we have to do in the situation we were in, because honestly, in that situation, these lions were dying. But to breed more and more and more in order to have cubs for tourists, for people to be intrigued with, to be captivated by, to attract tourists in, so that those tourists can have their moment with a cub, a lion, a little lion. We got to see that this is not a sustainable situation, because where are those lions going to be kept as soon as they grow too big to be in this little cub camp or inside with people in a tourist facility? And this happens very quickly. It's not long, 3 months, 4 months, and those cubs are not interacting with people on that level anymore. They're not being bottle fed anymore because they now start losing the reflex to suck, because they're now starting to eat meat. I mean, some of them will still suck occasionally, but they're eating meat. And they change. They are not able to just be held by people. In fact, to be honest, in my experience, they're not able to just be held by people even when they're little. They scratch. They absolutely scratch your arms the whole time they're drinking their bottle. They're kneading, scratching, and those little pin-sharp claws are raking into you. And then after that, much like a domestic cat, and I'm sure you listeners, because you lion quirks or you cat quirks, will know this about cats. If you try and just pick up your cat who loves you, right? You pick up your cat when your cat hasn't chosen to be picked up. They kick and they speed off. They jump away. If you start picking up arbitrary cats, like cubs, they do the same thing. They kick, they push. They do not want to be held. You cannot, I know this for a fact, you cannot pick up a cub, pass it from person to person, and that cub just takes it and is just docile. So if you go to a place where that's happening, those cubs have actually been semi-sedated in order to make them compliant and docile and allow strangers to pick them up. Also, another thing, which I could tell you for an absolute fact, having worked with all of these cubs, is that cubs sleep most of the day. And so you, Every time you pick them up or want to bottle feed them or play with them or tourists want to pass them from person to person, you're disturbing, you're interrupting their sleep. So you're also making them a little bit angry. Unless, of course, they're drugged and they can't do their natural thing. But it's not something that people can do, is just bottle feed and play with cubs and pass them around. So people go to these places and they feel that because to a large extent they're good people and possibly animal lovers, they are doing a good thing, they believe. So the draw card, as I've already spoken about in this episode, is this fascination for the fact that there's this wild, dangerous killer of an animal, awesome animal to be respected, that, wow, we can actually be around them. There's your draw card. Then there's this feeling of, I am having a special moment with this lion. I am bonding with this cub. Or if it's not interacting with cubs, you're going to a place where you might just be looking at the big adult through the fence, or staying in a cottage where there are lions lying around and you can see them while you're washing the dishes. I am bonding with that animal. Maybe at the end of a few days there, you feel like you actually have a special relationship with that lion. So there's the catch. You've been pulled in, you've been drawn in, and then you've been hooked. The thing, and this sort of came to me within the first few months of being in a situation like this, was there's nothing right about this. There's absolutely nothing right about cubs being born behind fences on a farm. So whereas I know that there's a lot of social media and even TV programs of me interacting with cubs and lions out there, but very, very quickly it was no longer about saving those cubs or looking after them, although I love every one of those dearly as almost like my own children. My children say that I do love the lions more, and I say I don't. I love you all equally. But very quickly, my reason for being there and for continuing this was about how do we stop this? How do we save these lions from following the natural course of events, which would happen there due to the business model, that they will either be sold for body parts, for bones, they'll be hunted, they'll be sold for breeding at other places. Some of the cubs might be sold overseas because to Spain, to the Middle East, to countries who buy them from South Africa as pets. How do I stop it? Hence, the main focus of this episode is I want people to realize that what I'm about is actually the stopping of breeding and of having lions in captivity. And everything in my life has pivoted at that time, that first year at that farm. In 2011 I went there, but it was 2012 was my first year there. Everything pivoted at that point to be that everything about my life is I will always look after lions in captivity, but to stop there even being lions in captivity. I don't want to lecture people who go to tourist places. I want to tell you, I understand why you go. I, more than anyone, get it. But I also, more than anyone, understand what happens to those cubs when you are not there. Very quickly, those cubs are used. Now, there are places that do their first culling. They cull the cubs because cubs are born, lions breed, right? They breed like rabbits. Lions breed like rabbits. When you hear about, captive places are breeding lions in order to supply lions back into the wild, genetically pure lions back into the wild. It's not the case in South Africa. It might be the case that there are lions needed in the wild elsewhere in Africa, but South Africa actually has sufficient lions in the wild places, in our wild parks, in the Kruger National Park, in all the smaller parks. In fact, in the smaller game reserves, the lion populations are managed. Contraception is used to curtail, to manage the amount of lions that are being bred, because lions breed fast. So gestation period's only around 118 days, more or less. So, and the farmer will take cubs away from the mother within the first 3 days. The mother having lost her cubs, because in the wild, if the cubs were gone, they have died. So she will, the way nature has it is, she will cycle, she'll go into estrus again, and so that she is ready to breed within a few days of losing her cubs. So when the farmer takes the cubs away from the lioness, she will go into estrus and she'll be able to breed again. So she can back to back, they can breed back to back potentially up to 3 litters in a year. If she's having on average 3 cubs in a litter, it could be 2, it could be 4, but let's just say 3 cubs on average in a litter. 3 times a year, that's 9 cubs. For the sake of easy maths, let's say she has 10 cubs in a year. So if he has, or she, the farmer, has 10 breeding lionesses, you're looking at around 100 lion cubs a year. They usually might have 30 breeding lionesses, more. It's 300 cubs. So there are a lot of cubs being born on these places, on these breeding farms. And some of them will be cycled in and out of the tourist facility, so you will only be seeing the ones they want you to see. But what's happening to the rest? Some of the places that I've now visited or gotten to know over the years, they do their first cull of cubs when the cubs are too big for the tourists to bottle feed or for their volunteers to bottle feed. Those ones are then euthanized or culled, and I've seen them in the freezer where they're just all these little cub bodies in the freezer waiting to be sent to where they're turned into, the skeletons are turned into ornaments, or the bones are crushed to go into the bone lots that are sent overseas for bogus medicine. Then some of those cubs will be kept to use for playing, but they can't have all of those cubs out there playing with tourists in these little areas that tourists are now allowed to go into to play with cubs. Some of them will go in there, and then after that there can be another culling. A few of those will then be kept for walking with lions, and that in the walking with lions industry, tourists will go and they walk. So they basically feel like the lions are wild because they get taken on a walk. Behind the scenes, those lions are trained to walk because, and now this again, I'm just going back to sort of empirical evidence, my own personal experience. You can't tell a lion to go for a walk. They will walk when they want to. Now remember, they're cats. And again, I'm talking to cats lovers, lion quirks. You guys know cats. You can't tell your cat when. Right now, we're going to get up and all go for a walk, and they're just going to lie there and go like, no. They walk when they want to walk. And when they want to walk is usually when a lion is going into play mode, stalk mode, getting ready to hunt. Sorry, this is my dog. She's now going to bark because she wants to get on the sofa. He makes a big thing. So you can't tell a lion when to walk, but you can train them using usually either some sort of force, so it would be a chain and a collar or electric probe, which are the things mainly used overseas, and often if they are used, they're done behind the scenes. So if, for instance, on YouTube, you see some guy taking his lion in the car, taking his lion to the beach or whatever, you don't see that there are people in the background with pods and chains and tasers and things. But those lions are trained. They don't do that just because they want to. And so in tourist parks in South Africa, where people can go and do lion walks, those lions equally have been trained. But what we don't see is, for instance, the ranger or the guides, they have wooden sticks, staffs, like a walking stick. All the tourists are given one as well. You're given one, and it's like, oh, yeah, you can walk with the staff. You also get told, keep your staff between you and the lion. This is twofold. One thing is if you keep your staff between you and the lion, it means you're never going to turn your back on the lion, which is a really bad thing to do. Turn your back on the lion, the lion's going to jump on you. But another thing is those lions have actually been trained. You think that it's a wooden staff, therefore it's innocuous, because we as humans think the wooden's fine. But inside the staff of the trainers, there is a taser. So the lion sees that wooden staff as an electric shocking tool. They have been trained. The bribes are used in the form of meat, but they've been trained using meat and using fear tactics. Those ones that do the lions, the walking with lions business, those guys have already gone through, they passed the culling. They didn't get culled in the first round, they didn't get culled in the second round. But ultimately, especially the males, because they're going to reach their testosterone, they have a huge boost in testosterone when they're at the age where in the wild they would now leave their maternal pride, the natal pride, and go walk about. But that huge boost in testosterone, which would tell them to leave their pride, also tells them, hey, you know what? I'm not so into this whole walking with people thing anymore. I want to leave. Now you're out and about in the middle of wherever the walking area is. They're just going to leave. And they also become tetchy, and they don't really want to be, just like they don't really want to listen to their mums anymore, and they want to break away from the natal pride. Think like, teenage boys getting to the sort of 17, 18-year-old teenage boys. They don't really want to do what they've been told to do. Come, here on the sofa, stop by me. Come, get some. Okay, so now Fraser's going to get up and Lexa's going to go to her bed. So those lions that you go to bottle feed or play with or walk with, every one of those is ultimately going to be used for some other form of business, which is they're going to be reduced to bones and the bones get sold, or they're going to be sold for breeding, or they're going to be hunted, or all three, because the hunter doesn't take the bones. So someone who sells a lion for hunting will get the money for the hunt. The trophy goes to whoever shot the lion, usually a foreigner, and the bones are also sold for way more than. So the bones are the biggest industry that's going on, more than the hunting. So you hear more about the hunting, the canned hunting, but a very large industry is the bones. So the tourism and going in there and wanting your moment with that lion, wanting your photo. I get people phoning me quite often here in the sanctuary saying they just want to bring their grandchild around for a photo. I just want to bring my 3-year-old around to see the lions. I'm like, we do by appointment. I will give people a tour, an educational tour. We're not open to the public because we're a sanctuary, not a zoo. But if there's an educational purpose behind it and I can get a message across to people, we could do a tour by appointment. Oh, no. She's too young for the tour. We just want to bring her. We just want a photo of her with the lions. I'm like, no, that is exactly what I'm trying to stop. The educational side of the tour is to stop people from going to places just to have their photo with a lion. So that is the tourism side of it, but I also want to speak about the owning side of it, because I also know that people have gotten in touch with me over the years, especially back in the day when there was a TV program that showed me with lions. Got a lot of people who got into contact with me from other countries saying, oh, wow, they also want a lion. Oh, they also want to have a lion sleeping in their bed or whatever. And then they would ask me for, sometimes they'd ask me for advice. Sometimes they'd just show me pictures of the lion they'd gotten, inspired by seeing me with lions. Now Lex has come this side with a big sloppy, wet nose and mouth from drinking water. And she's trying to come for rubs this side. So now those people get lions, they buy lions, and they want to have them in their homes. People don't do it. It is the most disrespectful thing that you can possibly ever do. And everybody who then follows or watches always in awe of you because you've got your lion. I know that the way you've got your lion is either in a cage, on a chain, being trained or kept in its place by some sort of fear, pain, supremacy move of yours. When people who know lions see you on your YouTube parading your lion or your tiger or your other big cat, we all know what's really going on behind the scenes. There's the people that you've got there keeping you from actually being attacked and eaten by your cat. But the impression that the general public gets is that, oh, if you have a loving relationship with your lion or your big cat, you can do this. You can't. So I've raised a lot of lions I've actually now raised 28 lions from Captivity, and the ones that have come in the last few years, and not on that farm, the breeding farm that I was on, but the ones that have come in here to sanctuary. We don't breed, but we have had some cubs that have come in that need physical care and rehabilitation. We've had to look after them. So there are some that have raised here, but of those 28, only 6 still come anywhere, and I don't go in with them. This is just through the fence. Still come saying, "Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you," and only at their discretion when they want to. Sometimes days can go by, weeks can go by, or a few of them might come sort of every day, but only at their discretion when they want to. And I still have to watch very carefully if I'm going to give them a little bit of love, and you keep on watching, like now they've had too much, or now they're in a mood, or maybe they smell or pick up something about me. I'm sad, or I've got a cold coming on, I'm feeling a bit weak, and they behave differently. Do not be fooled seeing on TV, seeing YouTube videos of people with their big cats thinking that that's what they're doing all the time. They're just showing you the edited little bit every now and again. But 99.9% of the time, people that are working with big cats, you're not seeing the full story. So when you see lions on these programs or on YouTube or whatever, please understand that what you're seeing is only what they want you to see. And in South Africa, if you go to a place, no matter what they tell you, I know that you don't want to hear this, but no matter what they tell you, there is no reason to breed lions in captivity. There is no justification. I have done all the research. I've been doing this and working in this industry for many years now, and I'm telling you, there is no justification, no reason. They're not breeding for the genetic purity or to provide lions, to put lions back into the wild. They're not taking, if they say to you that the lions they breed are genetically pure because they're taking them from Namibia and Botswana and the wild and all over, and they're taking in new lions, it's all just stories. And by going there, by thinking that you're going to get your little moment, think about the fact of those cubs not being allowed to sleep, having to be on duty, having to be touched by different people, carrying different scents, different illnesses, different diseases, just the sense alone. But I do think that this is now going off a little bit off topic, so I'm not going to go into there. But your need for a photograph or to bond or to have this experience, to sit on a veranda and watch lions while you sip your glass of wine, or to go and take photographs, think about what those lions are going through. If it's not something that is absolutely natural to them to be doing, they shouldn't be doing it. Lions running up to a perspex box because you've climbed in that and you're baiting them with meat so that you can take a photo out of the perspex box, it is wrong. It is not what the lion should be doing. You are creating a thing inside that lion's head, in their mind. You're taking them away from, unfortunately, these lions are captive. They're going to be in captivity. Let them be sort of content in their lives. They're not wanting to catch the person behind that perspex screen. Zoos that have their lions behind perspex or glass so the children can run up and touch the perspex and the glass, and the lion's going at them, and the parents are taking this video saying, oh, look how cute. Oh, the lion is bonding with my child. No, the lion just wants to eat your child. It is not desirable. It's not okay. Oh, I'm finding myself lecturing, and I'm so was committed to not lecturing, just explaining to you how I too was really intrigued and captivated, but have actually ended up making my entire life's work about not having lions in captivity and not breeding. So I think that there are going to be very, very, very many comments, and there's going to be a lot to answer. And I think what I'm going to do is end this episode now and then address people's comments and stories in another episode. So everyone who has been to these places, whether you think that it was the right thing or you ended up thinking it was the wrong thing, whether you were pleased or you're disappointed or whatever, anything to do with what I've spoken about now, if you actually have lions or other big cats, because you're also a lion quirk, give me your comments. Let's talk about it. And I think that we will have another episode that is really aimed at this. And then I also have some guests that we're going to be interviewing in the podcast, because as we've told you several times, they're interspersed with these sort of soliloquies or just Lena and myself chatting about our lions and our experiences. We also have a whole whack of really, really great guests and experienced people who work with lions on all sides of the spectrum. So there will be people who absolutely 100% believe that living with lions and loving lions in captivity and having them in zoos is right. We've got people who are trying to ban that, change legislation. We have people on all sides. Everyone who has got anything to do with lions and cats is a lion quirk. So we will have those in different episodes. But please leave your comments or message me, and let's just have another episode where we talk about all of this lion stuff between all of us lion quirks.